So, welcome to the Future of Wellbeing podcast. I'm here with Serena Huang, who is the former head of people analytics at PayPal, with a strong interest in data, people analytics, and well-being. Serena, welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
Pleasure to have you. So, it's really interesting. So you're a people analytics professional that has brought well-being into what you do. I'm a well-being professional that's brought people analytics into what I do. So it's great that we're colliding today, and I'm sure we'll have a great chat. But to just tell me a little bit before we get into it, why are you so kind of passionate about well-being and that intersection with people analytics? Tell us where that comes from.
Yeah, so I was the global head of people analytics at Kraft Heinz when COVID hit. Now, if you think about the frontline workers, those people who are making the mac and cheese and ketchup that the world needs, there's nothing more important than their health and safety. So before pandemic, I started talking a little bit about holistic health, and that includes, physical, mental, and other components. No one wanted to listen to me. Okay, they thought, okay, that is way out there, too futuristic. We don't need it right now. COVID hit. Everyone was asking me, are my employees healthy? What can we do to help? Are they doing well? And why is that? Well, it impacts business productivity directly. It impacts whether or not Kraft Heinz was able to put food on the table for the world.
Mm.
So overnight, it became important, and I was able to roll out, making great friends with all the attorneys across the company, the first global health and well-being survey for all employees for the first time in company history. Now, Kraft Heinz is an older company, so that was a huge accomplishment, and we were able to use the data to do amazing things for the company, which I'm happy to talk about in a bit. But I would say that was the starting point. It was definitely the catalyst of connecting employee well-being to business continuity, and definitely, for the world to have food to eat, more importantly. So I think that was perhaps number one. And then kind of phase two of pandemic, when we got vaccines finally, we're talking about how do we get employees vaccinated so they can be protected. Now, you probably recall that was a controversial topic, maybe still is in many parts of the world.
Mm.
And we as a company needed to figure out how to get them the help they needed, so that they could continue to work in a safe environment despite what they might believe and what the company might believe without sounding overly political. It's like, no, this is for your health. So I think those were two, I would say, huge moments for me personally and as a people analytics leader to see the power of data and to be able to show to business leaders this means your top line impact. This is
Mm.
not just me talking about a simple survey that feels good. No,
Mm.
this is important. Yeah, so I'll pause there. That's kind of how I got super passionate and then certainly reinforced with the good that came with it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess often the pandemic was a catalyst for companies being more interested in well-being, but I think we saw quite a lot of companies just reaching for solutions at that point. And what you're saying is actually that was the opportunity to collect more data,
Absolutely.
and then start to actually understand what was going on and link
Right.
well-being to the ability of the company to fulfill its purpose, to put food on the table of people at a time of need, which is amazing. Talk us through that process of collecting that data and some of the insights that you alluded to, please.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who step into the well-being space are quickly discovering there isn't great data
Mm.
on employee wellness, whichever dimension, right? It could be physical, it could be social, it could be financial health, what have you. The data almost doesn't exist. And a lot of times people stop there and said, no, I can't do anything. I don't have data. I give up. If you know my life story, I'm someone who does not give up. And in fact, is known to make it my mission to do better and to do what seems impossible. So things like collecting data on employee health as step one. I think I sort of work backwards on the outcomes I want to achieve first. So
Mm.
maybe step zero is figure out what problem and outcomes are important to the business, right?
Mm.
Not just to me as a researcher who finds data interesting,
Yeah.
fascinating, but to the CEO and the CFO. What would they care? What would get their attention? And they're
Mm.
very concerned about employee health and safety as it connects to business continuity and COVID, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And so I think now, fast forward to 2023, now we're talking about productivity a lot, right?
Mm.
Like, who cares about lack of engagement if it doesn't impact my top or bottom line?
Yeah.
Now, that is going to upset a lot of people who work in the employee engagement space, my peers included. But that's the truth. When I'm able to connect those seemingly soft metrics to hard metrics like revenue, profit, cost savings, suddenly the years perked up. So that's a lesson I've continued to share in my speaking engagements and workshops
Mm.
as well, is that it's not that employee engagement and employee health don't matter. It's that you need to be able to connect the dots. So work backwards on the problem. So if your problem is employee productivity, if your problem is increasing revenue, if your problem is customer satisfaction, right?
Mm.
How do you get there? And then work backwards to see what data you need to collect if you don't have them today to
Mm.
get there. And then go for it. So one of the hypotheses we had at the beginning of COVID that we started to hear from employees, again, this is just through one-off conversations on Zoom and Teams, not data, was that people who are trapped in small apartments felt really lonely.
Mm.
They really want to go back to the office ASAP, tomorrow if possible. And then we had other people who said, I'm really enjoying the time I have with my family and my pets. I never want to go back to the office again. So suddenly you have these two extreme opinions and noise and voice. Rather, we wanted to figure out which was real because the policy you implement is drastically different depending on which is true. So we wanted to see, is there a different population that might be feeling this differently? Is it people who live in large cities like Chicago and New York who are trapped in small apartments, and then people who are in the suburbs are totally fine and enjoying their family time? And so as you form those hypotheses that can translate into, most importantly, actionable insights, right? What can the business actually do? If you tell me that you are trapped in your house and you want to get out just as a different way to work and to feel creative, to feel connected to other people, sure, let's figure out a safe way for you to get back to the office.
Mm.
And if you need more support, actually spending time with your family, why being productive, but you are having trouble with work-life boundaries? That's another set of solutions. So figure out those problem statements first and then collect the data accordingly.
Mm.
Because if you don't have employees, for example, in large cities who might be feeling trapped and lonely in a small apartment, don't ask that question.
Yeah.
If you have zero budget to help parents and caretakers with that burden they have at home, please don't ask that question, because there's nothing more frustrating to a survey taker,
Mm.
regardless of levels, tenure, and age, than you asking me for my opinion and then never doing anything about it.
Yeah,
So
I
I
was
could
really
go
going to,
on.
yeah, I was really going to pick up on that point because I think in a lot of surveys we can ask for information, and the individual filling the survey in doesn't really get anything back, maybe gets some feedback, but the frustrating bit is if their voice is not heard, particularly the collective voice, and there may not be budget for certain things. So what you're saying is be careful of the questions you ask when you're designing these surveys.
Right, definitely. I've seen companies do things like, well, what perk would you like? and then they have zero budget for 80% of the perks. Why are you asking about the 80%, right? If you have no money for gym pass, don't ask about a gym subsidy. If you
Yeah.
don't have any money to go towards the commute, and everyone's complaining about the commute, don't ask about it if you're not going to do something. I think there's sort of like also the when once people get over the hurdle of, okay, I'm going to collect data, this is going to be hard, then you get into the next phase of a trap that people fall into. It's like, okay, this is my one chance to collect data, let me ask as many questions as possible and then I'll figure out what to do with them later. Sure, great. But guess what? The employees want you to do something right now. They don't want later. As soon as
Mm.
you can, as soon as you get the data back, they're expecting something to change or at least be acknowledged that something will change based on their feedback.
Yeah. And what do you think good practice looks like? So, the company will survey, the results perhaps get given to the line manager. What and the line manager may or may not be able to influence, all of the challenges that come out of the data. But what does good look like? Is it sharing that with the team? Is it inviting the team to think about some of the issues collectively? What does good look like in how you can use that data?
Yeah, definitely great question. And I think this is where probably the third trap of when companies get stuck in not taking actions that's meaningful to the employees. So there's sort of two philosophies, I would say maybe schools of thought on how to do action planning. Is it more top down, right? The leadership decides here are the big things we're gonna do and then cascade, or is it more bottom up? Every team does their own thing, and then collectively we should be able to make change.
Mm.
There's no right or wrong. That's more of a strategic choice, and that needs to align with company culture. In some
Yeah.
company cultures, top down doesn't work at all. In some
Mm.
others, bottom up doesn't work at all. And they must hear from the C-suite before they are willing to do something. So you need to figure out as if you're leading the survey design and those efforts and implementation, what the company culture will support, so you can actually move the needle. So once you decide that, I think a realistic way is definitely for managers who have large enough of team to get responses to go over the results with the employees. I would caution against having the employees take on all the action planning, because then
Mm.
it could suddenly feel like, okay, I am doing all the work. You asked me for my feedback, and now I'm leading some initiative to improve the score. Wait, what happened? I thought you were going to do something. So I think it's definitely a joint effort, but be very careful in that messaging on why their involvement is important. Is that so I tend to, even for things like 360 survey, which is for a very different purpose. I know I've always admired leaders who are willing to share everything that they've received in the report
Mm.
with the employees, and ask the question of, okay, maybe I now work with the executive coach on improving my leadership effectiveness, and here are the three things I'm going to do differently, very concrete from your feedback. Does that sound like a plan? Would that be meaningful for you, or would you rather that I do something else, like take
Yeah.
off more and leave you alone, right?
Mm.
So I think be realistic with that, and same with any kind of surveys, whether it's well-being or overall engagement. As you come to that discussion, do a little prep yourself as a leader. Go through the data and come up with 3 to 5 things you will do differently, and ask for feedback on that instead.
Mm.
I think that's much, usually in my experience at least, better received than let's talk about all the results and then create a plan together. Then that's when people start to say, oh my goodness, you just put another meeting on my
Mm.
calendar and I am essentially doing work that you should be doing. Again, not everyone's going to feel that way, but those are actual opinions and comments I have heard.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's one. And then the other, let's talk about the leadership level, right? It's typically not well received if the leadership team doesn't say anything about the survey. So
Yeah.
I'll say that's pretty intuitive and no data needed, because everyone's wondering what happened to our collective voice and what
Mm,
will be different next year. You asked me, so there must be something you have learned besides saying thank you, besides telling me X% of us participated. That's great, but so
mm,
what?
mm,
So make sure the leadership team is able to share the so what and now what with employees. So the so what, so what is very easy to kind of do immediately. The now what that require action planning and additional analysis sometimes may take
mm,
longer. And that's okay. You may have two pieces of communication. One, the so what that comes out immediately might look like, here are the quick themes we have heard, and we're going to do something about it. We might run additional focus groups. We might do deep dive analysis with the help of the people analytics team and come back to you on what we can do. We might
yeah.
collect, additional feedback from some of you because we've identified one area that really needs help. Whatever that is, that's your first set of communication.
Mm,
And then at least employees are informed, okay, something is coming, and tell them when, right?
mm,
Hold yourself as a leadership team accountable for timeline, something realistic, right? Don't take a full quarter. I know we operate on quarter terms, but if you're trying to run quarterly surveys, for example, and your action planning communication alone takes a full quarter, then
yeah.
it's probably not fast enough. So
Yeah.
so make sure before the next survey comes out, you have not only communicated what you were going to do, but people are starting to feel some of the impact. That
Yeah.
is ideal. So I don't have a magic formula for the frequency and communication and surveys, but the guideline I would provide is make sure your action planning and communication is fast enough before your next survey comes out. So
Of course, yeah, yeah. But I love that the so what and the now what. Great, great, great sort of pillars really for senior leadership to hang their hats on. But I love that idea and your first point really of kind of not asking the team to do all the work of the manager, but actually come with some ideas, but ask for feedback. So you're creating involvement, you're creating the ability to influence, but actually you as the manager have analyzed the data and you've done the work, which I think is really cool. Um, just getting back to your point about linking well-being to company performance, company purpose, and some of the financials or the language of the CFO, for example. How did you do that when you introduced that survey in Kraft Heinz?
yeah, so it was we as a manufacturing company of food, there are certainly metrics at the P&L level, at the plant level on what they're producing, whether or not they're meeting those production goals and who's going to be delayed and so on. And it was one of the earlier things that we did was actually overlaying the uh gosh, you remember the Johns Hopkins data
Yeah,
with COVID cases that we're tracking every day. So we were able to extract that data and pull into a map where our employees were, and then also overlaying sort of which product were we making where, to kind of inform which product line might be at risk. So like I don't particularly I can't make the individual connection like, 3 boxes of mac and cheese will be at risk. But if you know this particular area is now, red instead of yellow last week,
yeah,
then you know that you are at more, higher risk for the employees in this location to get sick.
yeah,
And therefore you either, at the time had to shut down the whole plant at the beginning, or at least you lose, because they're in such tight quarters
mm,
that one person gets sick, then a lot of other people might get sick. So then you can create action plans on, what do we do with this? Is there another facility that can help? Is there other people, temporary workers that we can bring in? And in COVID times, all that is very challenging.
Mm,
But by overlaying simple things like the external data on what is going on out there, we also took in some, regulation changes data as well on,
mm,
like if you have to shut down for 3 days versus no shutdown, that's a huge difference for a production site.
yeah.
So kind of all of that combining to essentially be more proactive and forward looking instead of
Mm,
just saying like, hey, production is down. Okay, they already know production is down. But the value I always tell people analytics team is not backward looking or the current state, but forward looking. What can
mm,
you tell me about the future that I need to know so that I can either avoid going to it's like driving, right? How do I avoid going into the pothole?
yeah.
As opposed to as opposed to not being to chart a better path for the business. So some of that is seemingly easy data analysis, but very innovative in a way that traditional people analytics doesn't really cover. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that kind of links to really as I see the direction of travel for well-being and people analytics, in that it's relatively easy to collect well-being data, isn't it? You can survey your people, you can ask them how they are, you can ask them how happy they are, or you can use research validated surveys if you wish, and you get that data back. But in isolation, that data isn't that useful, is it? Unless you're overlaying
right.
with other aspects of team, company,
Yes.
divisional performance.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and gosh, performance management is going
Mm,
through its own revolution right now. I think it was, gosh, 5, 7 years ago when big companies started ditching performance ratings, and then in COVID, again, a lot of companies did because it became really difficult to measure and unfair at times. And now it's sort of coming back in different forms for different companies. Like, how do we
mm,
measure productivity? And I think that's going to be the next hurdle for a lot of people in analytics teams and business leaders.
mm.
And remember the puzzle we kept hearing during COVID, I think probably the first couple of years, like productivity is keeps climbing for
Yeah.
some reason. And now it's decline, of course, but it keeps climbing. And we're wondering, okay, people are burned out, people are exhausted. How is this possible? And at what point are we going to fall off the cliff? And I
Mm,
think the cliff has happened, right? The productivity numbers that came out recently are not great. And I think we finally hit that point. And now some leaders are saying, oh, it's because employees are doing multiple jobs with the help of AI. And I don't know if that's true or not. I think the burnout and mental health crisis are definitely real, and it's never been addressed
mm,
full on. And so a lot of companies and a lot of people, because it's easier to do what have sort of moved on like none of that happened.
yeah.
But I wonder, especially for people who have never processed what COVID meant for them, will hit that wall
Yeah.
individually. So,
Yeah. And I think there's a delayed reaction to the burnout rising because of COVID. I mean, I don't think productivity went up. I think production went up. We were working longer hours, even though we weren't commuting in many cases. And I think
right.
that was being driven by fear to a certain extent, fear of not being visible, and kind
Yes.
of management that probably wasn't as trusting and
Yeah.
as enlightened as it could be. And
Yeah, I think
again,
a lot of people went into overdrive, right? They went
yeah,
into overdrive to either prove their worth, and then I think then the layoff started, right? That just made it worse.
yeah,
Now I have to work more hours to make sure I'm visible. So I think a lot of that needs to be figured out with data analytics, I hope,
mm,
and not so much of the performance, just to
mm,
sort of fake FaceTime, if you will.
yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
I'm hopeful that we'll have real productivity measures, outcome based, that is not hours based, at some point soon.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting when you've got metrics like production quotas and targets. BT, our big telecom here in the UK, did a really interesting study for their call centers. Now, call centers, you can really very easily measure performance because they've got hard metrics you can tap into. And they cross-referenced, the well-being of teams with their
Mm,
performance and found a causal relationship that the teams with higher well-being performed much better than the teams with lower well-being.
yeah.
And I guess for me, it's data like that and creating data like that at a company and team level to really start to understand that interplay between looking after our people and creating an environment that is conducive to well-being, because that makes them more effective at their jobs.
Right.
And my question, I guess, is how much do you think data has got a role to play in enlightening leadership teams on this connection?
I I think it's got a huge role to play. I also think the leadership team themselves have an even bigger role to play in
Yeah.
being open-minded to receive.
Mm.
So I do a data storytelling workshop these days, and it's been tremendous fun. So if
Yeah.
anyone's looking for tips, let me know. And one of the things that I say that surprise people a lot is data alone do not change minds.
Yeah.
Data alone do not lead to any actions. You need the story. Okay.
Mm. Yeah.
And why is that? Right. I think every people analytics team member leader have gone through at some point in their life a leader who just wants the data to prove what they already know to support a claim that they wanted to make. And that is a terrible use of people analytics time and talent.
Yeah.
But it happens, right? It's reality. We're curious. We want to know if it's true. Sure, get it. But certainly make sure that your team isn't doing just that.
Yeah.
So if data alone doesn't change minds, if data alone doesn't lead to action, then what do we do? Well, you need the stories around data to make sure that it resonates with the leadership team and they are going to do something about it. So I think the responsibility, I would say, partially on the people analytics team to tell the story around data. Sometimes people come to me for career coaching and they're super frustrated. They're like, I keep showing them this data, no one would do anything. It's so
Yeah.
compelling. The analysis is amazing. It's like, I believe you. And guess what? Your leaders probably don't care.
Yeah.
And you're either not solving the problem they care about, or you didn't tell a story that makes sense to them, that make them
Yeah.
care. So that part is on you, right? Now, if you do all those things and they still refuse to take action, then okay, let's talk about alternative paths, right?
Yeah.
But you need to make sure that you're doing your part as a data person to tell the story, to solve the right problems, and don't just expect data to do its magic on its own, because it does
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I
In
love.
fact, sometimes the more data, the worse it gets. They almost get overwhelmed and say,
Yeah.
please stop feeding me data. I don't want any more.
Yeah, I love that, and we'll certainly put a link to your profile if people are interested in that workshop. Without giving your secrets away, what would you come away with from that workshop? I'm really interested in this in terms of, how do you take data and craft stories around it?
Yeah, definitely. So one, the three C's that I share in the workshop, and we do practice around this, makes it more powerful. One is clear. Your data story needs to be clear. Meaning,
Mm.
if I give you a PowerPoint presentation, you don't need to call me to ask what does this mean. Okay.
Yeah.
If I build a dashboard and I say here's a link, you can figure out what to do with the dashboard without
Yeah.
calling me or my team. Two is care. The person who's reading your stuff needs to care, your
Mm.
audience, whether that's a CEO or someone who's frontline, they need to care. They can't come back and ask you, why did you send this to me? Okay, that's a
Mm.
terrible sign. And then finally, there needs to be a call to action. I don't care if it's a dashboard or a PowerPoint. There
Mm.
better be a call to action with your data. Okay.
Mm.
Don't leave me asking as an audience and receiver of the data, the so what and now what. Tell me the now what.
Mm.
because I don't have time, because I'm not a data expert, because you are.
Yeah.
So if you can achieve those three C's, that your data story is clear, your audience cares, and there's always a call to action, then great, you're on your path. So in the workshop, we do actual practice with data, and then I make people practice presenting the story. So it's not something we're taught in school,
Mm.
unfortunately, right? Whatever school you went to, it's probably not part of the curriculum. So suddenly you enter the corporate world and you're expecting to not only be the expert of data, but tell a compelling story with it. And you've
Mm.
never received any of that training. And because I'm so tied to the academic community as well, I see that as one of the gaps of stop teaching people how to build better dashboards and better machine learning models. Like start teaching people how to convey the message so the leadership
Mm.
team isn't sitting there wondering, why are you telling me all of this? And you are wondering, why aren't they doing anything with this beautiful
Mm.
data and charts? So
Yeah.
I really want to make that frustration go away on both sides with the storytelling.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. And thank you so much for sharing the three C's. I think that there's a bit for me around understanding why the user of that data will care, and there might be different reasons for different professionals, and I think certainly when you talk about leaders, some will care about well-being data because it's the right thing to do and they'll care about the health of the humans. Others will care about the bottom line or the ability to grow P&L, whatever it might be. But I'm pleased you mentioned call to action, and it's given me a little bit of validation of FormScore, because we give the line managers some kind of calls to action and some tips based on the data that's coming out. So if it's meetings that is the negative driver of well-being for their people, then invite people to consider whether all meetings are essential. Some simple tips that the manager can then take to the team. So I'm pleased we're getting a little bit of it right, which is good to know.
Absolutely. That's
Um,
amazing.
so let's collect our own little data points if you're happy to do so. As you can see, my form score today is 7 out of 10. I'm on good form. I've Serena, just recovering from a period of challenging depression in recent weeks, where um, I know rhyme or reason behind it. I can't understand the why, but I've got through that. I've accepted it, and now I'm sort of coming out the other side. So back to good form. I slept really well last night, which is great for my well-being. And here in the UK, the sun is shining and the weather is great today, so that's given me a boost as well. But how about you? What's your score today?
I am an eight.
Brilliant.
These conversations are always so energizing for me. Any
Yeah.
chance for me to connect with new people with insights around data is great. And the sun is also out here in Chicago. And we're getting to the season of beautiful weather.
Yeah.
And so that's been good. And I also did sleep better yesterday than the night before, so that helps. I found sleep to be such a gosh, such it's so impactful. I don't think we
Mm.
talk about it enough. And yeah, I think we should. And I don't again, this is probably not where I need more data on why sleep matters or the world. I think we just need to experience it. Try a few
Yeah.
days with great sleep and see how much better you feel in general.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the form score data, we see sleep as one of the most selected drivers of
Mm.
well-being, and it's often split pretty 50-50 as to whether it's boosting well-being or detracting from it,
Wow.
depending on how
Okay.
people have slept. And I
Right.
think the knowledge that I try to give people are, we need to think about the things that promote good sleep and build those into our routine, whether that's getting out into daylight, whether it's exercising, whether it's technology turn-offs an hour before bed, all that good stuff
Yeah.
to promote good sleep. Well, great to see that you're an 8 out of 10. So this is the future of well-being, and naturally we've been talking about that a little bit, but I think one of the things that I'm hearing a lot more of, as we move from coming up with well-being solutions to really understanding the impact of work on our well-being, is the need to understand really at quite a granular level in a workplace what is impacting. So whether that is feelings of belonging, whether it's feelings of fairness, whether it is excessive workload, whether it is a supportive line manager, whether you buy into the vision, whether you have meaningful work. I think there's quite a lot of factors. But if we truly want to make work a net positive on our well-being and ensure people then can perform at their best and thrive, the data tells us that they will if they do. We've got to understand those factors. Now, for me, this is really where data and collection of data is important. But what's your perspective on that, Serena?
Um, couple a couple things. I think one, certainly there's a lot of external research on these topics, and I always encourage people to read on what is the latest and greatest. One of the metrics recently that surprised a lot of people, and I share it with every talk I give on mental health, is that the person that has the most impact on your mental health, guess who it is?
I know this. It's your line manager, which is equal to that of your loved one, your partner, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, this was not rehearsed, so I did not know whether Rob was going to know or not. So yeah, so think about that, right? The person that you said yes to at the altar 20 years ago, or maybe not, right? Whoever your life partner is, and your manager have
Yeah.
same level of impact on your mental health. That is so profound as a finding. And I think, as a data person, I am both optimistic and skeptical at the same time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when I hear something like that, I first wonder, is that true for me? Right?
Yep.
And I think that's natural. And then two, is that true for my organization?
Mm.
Because I wonder if that is just the survey respondents who happen to experience a particular type of manager that does not apply to my workforce.
Yeah.
So my encouragement is definitely take external insights, but don't take it as gospel, right?
Yeah.
Use that to form your own problem statements, hypothesis, and then do your own analysis to
Yeah.
see whether or not your employees, your team members are different or the same.
Mm.
Because what you don't want to do is blindly take it and then create some sort of policy change or program, and then only to realize actually your employees happen to be the outliers,
Yeah.
and it is actually their one-over-one manager that impact their mental health a lot more than their line manager. Like imagine if that is true, even as a data point. It may seem subtle, but your program is going to be completely different, and you will miss the mark if you don't validate. So I highly recommend people to validate with their own data and not take whatever academic institution or particular publication, even with a medical journal, right? Because
Mm.
your employees are not in those surveys. So it may not be the same. So I think that's definitely number one. And then two, I think being open-minded and staying curious is so important to me as a person, and that's how I hire people.
Yeah.
I think you can be trained on any technical skills, but if you're not open-minded, if you don't have the sense of curiosity continuously, there's so little data analytics can do for you. So,
Yes.
um, the topic that you mentioned that caught my attention earlier was diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a
Yeah.
sense of belonging, let's call it.
Mm.
Um, I have seen repeatedly in numerous surveys that I've done myself that there is a really strong connection between employee wellness and whether or not they feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Now, if I tell you that, you're going to say, well, duh, Serena, of course. That's not shocking. You don't need data. Actually, I do.
Mm.
Because that is not a traditional link that has been made in any studies,
Mm.
right? When you talk about well-being, there's a lot of talk around productivity and whatnot. And then on the DEI side, a lot of people will say, oh, I want to show up as my authentic self, but, not too much that scares people away. What does that mean?
Mm.
And if we just use plain human words here for a second, if I show up to a work environment and I feel like I have to constantly hide part of me so that I can belong, so that I can fit in, so
Mm.
that I can behave like you, so I can dress like you, so I can talk like you, Do you think I'm going to feel happy and fulfilled and thriving?
No.
Probably not, because
Yeah.
I'm spending all my energy doing those things
Yeah.
so that I can look normal. So, I give that as a simple example of why we need to think about those two topics in a more data-focused ways.
Yeah.
Yes, I see them in conferences as connected topics, and there's very rarely do I see data showing up. It's sort of like, well, it's just the right thing to do. Again, think about your CEO and your CFOs, right? They're going to want to see the numbers and
Yeah.
story around those numbers. Why that's the case? Why do I want to invest in my managers to make sure people can show up as their authentic selves? What does that even mean? Like I
Mm.
said, boil down to human language. That means I don't have to fix my hair a certain way when I show up. That means I don't have to put on different clothes just for this meeting. That
Mm.
means I don't have to silence my music that I know you won't approve of because we're from different cultures.
Mm.
All those things that are very subtle but drains my energy as an employee. And so I think once you have data on how highly correlated those items are, for example, at least number one, and then dig into the comments. What are people saying? For the people who feel like they really belong, what are they saying? For the people who feel like they don't belong, what are they saying? So I often do this text and analytics on the extremes
Yeah.
to give a sense of what you can do better from the people who are really struggling on that item,
Yeah.
and then what you're really doing well and keep doing that. So think about that as a way to very fast action planning. People are really telling you what's working and what's not. Do something
Yeah.
about
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think we see belonging as a really important factor that's tagged quite a lot. I know the Indeed study that's got about 15 million data points of self-reported well-being on organizations tag belonging as the most tagged driver. It's really important, but I think then what's important is why do people not feel that they belong and they have to
it.
behave a certain way before then the so what and what can you do about it,
Yeah.
and that's where kind of training and culture and
Yes.
culture change need to happen. But yeah, totally agree. You mentioned music in passing there. So, as you know, music's really important to me, and I know it's really important to you. I've seen you perform on the piano and singing, which has been really wonderful to see you post that publicly. But I
Yeah.
asked you for a particular track because we're putting together a playlist of mood boosting tracks that people select. So you chose one, and I'm just going to share my audio, and we're just going to play a little bit of this track. It's "Unstoppable" by Sia. Bear with me. Managed to capture kind of emotion in her songs very well, and I think that could either be a mood booster or it could be a motivational track. What does it mean to you, that track?
Oh, I think, okay, I would encourage everyone to look up the lyrics and listen to the full song.
Mm.
There's a lot of, sort of I pretend to be stronger than I am.
Mhm.
Sometimes, at least that's my interpretation. And I put on armor, right? And to show you how strong I am. And I think that as a woman of color, I think about that a lot.
Mm.
When and as an immigrant to this country, there were times when I had to be strong and be stronger than I felt inside sometimes. And then also as a leader of a team in numerous large organizations, fighting the battle of people who don't care about data, and me as someone who's standing up the function from the ground up, I had to be strong. And I tell myself and the team that we are unstoppable. Like,
Yeah.
and we're unstoppable because we're a good team. We work together. We lift each other up. And it's not just the data. It's not just the technical skills. That certainly helps. But it's really in the people. And I remind myself when I'm down too that I am unstoppable. So that's my encouragement to everyone. If you feel blue a little bit here and there, which we all do, try listening to this song.
Fabulous. Well, we'll be sharing that in the notes, and obviously I've just added that to the playlist. So thank you for sharing your perspectives on that. So we're going to do a little quick fire round now. Nothing I've asked you to prepare for. So I'm going to give you a few categories. If the future of well-being were a something, what would it be for you? So the first something, if the future of well-being were a color, what color comes to mind for you, Serena?
Oh my goodness. Um, a very vibrant purple.
Vibrant purple. Why purple?
Purple is like a combination of blue and red, right?
Yeah.
See, very analytical. I break
Yeah.
things down.
I love it.
So,
I love it.
so I think the blue to me is calmness and
Yeah.
red is passion.
Yeah.
And I see the combination of the two coming together. And that's why I think it's vibrant purple.
I love it. Love it. And I love your explanation. Thank you. So, next one, if the future of well-being were an animal, what animal would it be for you?
Oh my goodness. An animal. Goodness. Let's see. Wow, I was not prepared for this.
No.
Um, I'm going to say unicorn.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Why a unicorn?
Is that an animal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't
We can have unicorn. Absolutely.
it's got legs.
Yeah.
It runs and flies. So yeah, so I think there's so much innovation going on right now, and I feel like we are at a really critical and transformative times. And I hope that organizations see this as an opportunity to really do something different than before, to not do what we have always done, to not be simply constrained by the lack of data and lack of budget, and be the unicorn organization of putting employee well-being first.
Yeah.
And then comes, like I said, use data to connect the dots. But if you do, you can see more revenue, more profit. And I think that's a very unicorn kind of organization today. And I hope to see a bunch of them in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's quite an elusive thing, and we're working towards it. Yeah. Love it.
Yes.
That makes good sense to me. Right. A couple more. If the future of well-being were a place, where would that be?
Oh, definitely a peaceful beach.
Peaceful beach.
Yes, I think so. I've read a study that water has healing power. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes the doctors will recommend that if you're struggling with depression, for example, get to a body of water.
Mm.
It's very calming, and so I think about the healing power of water. A large body of water, it has to be moving. That means the bathtub in your house doesn't work.
Yes.
A large lake with some waves, maybe, but preferably ocean. So hence my beach. Sort of we can all find the time and space to heal what needs
Yeah.
to be healed.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and I am on my own healing journey, and throughout the pandemic, I've realized there's a lot of healing that people need to do on their own with with professional help.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
peaceful
I love
beach.
peaceful beach. I love that. I'm certainly drawn to water, and find it very kind of empowering. So mine would certainly be near a body of water as well. So final one on the quickfire round. It's the toughest one as well. If the future of well-being were a food, what would it be for you?
Oh, a vegan frittata.
A vegan frittata. Why a vegan frittata?
Oh, because I make them. Uh, you can check out my recipes on my YouTube channel for really fun cooking ideas. But no, all jokes aside, I do think in the conversations within sustainability, there's a lot of talks around, just eating less meat,
Yeah,
and vegan may not be the only diet choice and may not be for everyone. But I do think about that a lot and try to incorporate in my daily life. And so, yeah. And for Tada, I also love art. You can see that's my own
yes.
painting back
Well,
there. And I think frittata is just a beautiful dish.
yeah,
So if I can eat something healthy that also looks good on a plate, that's you get kind of two birds, one stone. So vegan
perfect.
frittata,
Yeah, perfect. That's
sustainable environment and
it.
sustainable human life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think eating healthily obviously has a direct impact on our well-being with, the research that we're starting to understand the
Yes.
importance of the gut, the microbiome on,
Yeah.
our brain health. So yeah, I love that selection. Thank you very much. Okay, so that was the quick fire round. Thank you for being a good sport there, and I loved your analysis around it as well.
That
So
was
what
tough, Rob.
it is tough, and I don't ask you to prepare for it because I like to get into your thinking behind it, but you did
Yeah.
really well. Um, so, what would your top tip be for professionals in the workplace who are looking to improve workplace well-being? I guess from your perspective as well, from a data point of view.
Hmm. Something that has gotten me through difficult times during COVID is certainly physical activity,
Yeah,
and I'll say outdoor time when it's not freezing cold in Chicago. So physical activity, if you read up on the mind-body connection, and even just if you don't believe in that, try it for yourself, right?
yeah,
Just commit to some physical activity for a whole week, nonstop, 7 days,
mhm,
and come back and tell Rob and I if you feel a little bit better. Okay. And I've done this numerous times. No one has come back to me and said they feel worse. So physical activity is really important. I would encourage any leader, especially in knowledge economy, where just sitting down
mm,
all the time,
yeah,
to incorporate that somehow. And it doesn't have to be 5 a.m. or it can be whenever. It can be gentle yoga. But get your body moving. I think that's not number one.
mm,
And then from a data perspective, I I think every manager should know how well their employees are doing. Now, I know this is very controversial. I will take it a step further and argue that manager should be held accountable for the mental health of all their employees. And why is that? Well, not just because of the 70% people who said their manager have the most impact on their mental health, but also think about for yourself, if they are not well, if your team is not well, they cannot perform at their best. Don't you want them to perform at their best? Again, I think it's so intuitive, but people don't think about it, right? Something that I've started to talk about in a separate set of workshops is trauma-informed leadership.
mhm,
Trauma-informed leadership, again, encourage everyone to just look this up. Don't take my word for it. Um, I will share a little bit from just personal experience last year. Trigger warning. There was a shooting in Chicago on 4th of
mm,
July. Most of you probably remember at the parade. Very traumatic experience for people who are there. I immediately texted my team members to make sure they are safe.
mm,
Was there any manager guideline that tells me to do that? Absolutely not. I needed to know. I was worried because I had team members who live really close by. And I also realized that that kind of event could trigger something in people.
mm,
They don't have to be someone who had been through gun violence. It doesn't have to be that. But I realized because I'm a trauma informed leader, I realized that can trigger something. So that Monday morning, when we all got together for our kickoff, I was sensing that the vibe was off. People were feeling just different, on edge, sad, combination of those, particularly those in the Midwest. I think
Yeah.
those in California were less impacted. And and I said, hey, would you bear with me? And I'm going to walk you through a quick 3-minute meditation.
Mm.
And we did that as a team. I was like, I don't know, maybe it's for me, but I don't feel centered right now. I need to be more grounded before I can start the day and talk about sprint planning.
Mm. Yeah.
So I did that. Again, I share that as an example of what trauma-informed leadership could mean as an additional skill, as an additional knowledge for organizations, and
Mm.
also just for every single manager to know this. Like, I don't think it is a manager's job to prevent any triggers from happening. But once you know someone might have had an experience with a particular event that they might be having a difficult time that day because of it, and you know it, it is your responsibility to do something about it. That could mean give them the day off. That could be take everything off their plate. That could be
Mm.
simply listening to them, but
Yeah.
it's your responsibility to do something about it. And I know in the HR space it gets very sensitive. We don't, the organizations don't want to get sued once they know something, and so on. So yes, definitely consult the attorneys on what you should do. But I really think fundamentally, I would love for all managers to take accountability for the mental well-being of their employees.
Yeah. I love that, and thank you for sharing that example. I think we need to equip our managers to have the confidence to behave like that. But I think if looking to our strap line here at FormScore, be more human. It's kind of what it's all
Love
about, isn't it?
it.
It's
Yes.
more human leadership. So thank you for sharing that. So lastly, before I let you go, any recommended reads or listens or watches? Anything that you're reading that's you'd like to recommend to our viewers?
Hmm. Yeah, I think those the topic around compassion and empathy,
Yeah.
as a leader, I would say those are general topics I would recommend. And then definitely your typical kind of HBR MIT Sloan review on latest research that is backed by data on these topics. I just keep an alert on myself,
Yeah.
and kind of kind of listen along. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I have very diverse tastes as well. So it's every week I have a different topic. And I spend quite a bit of time reading and listening. And I think something that I've started to do a lot more after starting my own company is spending time reflecting.
Mm.
I was doing so much in consuming, and I still
Yeah.
do, like 16 to 20 hours a week, reading podcasts and whatnot, my learning
Yeah.
time. And now I try to spend, many, many hours in the reflection as well on what
Yeah.
would I do with this information? What do I actually do differently? So I don't just consume and not do anything with it.
I think that's wonderful, that because that's when we grow, isn't it? That's when we take those learnings and we grow as humans. So building in reflection time, I love it. Serena, thank you so much. I've heard a lot. The things that really resonated for me are particularly around data and well-being is craft your stories, think of your audience, make sure those stories are relevant to engage them so that they care, and have that call to action. What are we going to do with this data, with managers coming up with the ideas, feedback for requested from the teams? I think that's lovely, but lots of great stuff in there. Serena, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the Future of Wellbeing podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, feel free to do that. I have a newsletter as well that's free. And then I just launched my new website. It's datawithserena.com. So please check it out.
Fantastic. We'll put those links in the notes for you as well. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.